You know that feeling, right? That pull, that urge that just makes some things feel automatic.
Mm.
That's really the heart of habits.
Hmm.
So today, we're diving into how you can make the habits you actually want, the good ones, feel just as, well, compelling as maybe some others we won't mention.
Exactly. We've been looking at some really interesting stuff here, specifically focusing on this one big idea: make it attractive.
Right. It's not just about gritting your teeth and using willpower.
No, it goes deeper. It's about understanding what actually, motivates us, what pulls us in.
Yeah, and the science behind it is pretty fascinating, actually. So our mission today is to unpack that science. What makes a habit stick? What makes it appealing?
And crucially, how can we use that? How can you apply it to build habits that last?
Okay, let's get into it. We should probably start with this concept. It sounds a bit weird at first. Supernormal stimuli.
It does sound technical, maybe, but it's interesting how looking at animals can tell us so much about ourselves. Take Nico Tinbergen's work. Herring gull chicks.
Oh, yeah, the birds. They peck the red dot on the parent's beak for food, right?
Yeah.
That's the
I
instinct.
think it's the one. So Tinbergen starts playing around with this. He makes, fake beaks.
And exaggerates the signal. What happened?
Well, he found that a fake beak with 3 big, bright red dots got a much bigger reaction from the chicks. Way more pecking than for a normal beak.
Wow.
And it's not just gulls. Think about the gray-lag goose. It instinctively rolls eggs back into its nest.
Okay.
But if you give it a giant fake egg, like a volleyball, it goes absolutely crazy trying to roll that thing back. Even more effort than for a normal egg.
So it's like the wiring in their brain is set for round object, but giant round object just blows the circuit. It's like a supersized trigger.
Exactly. That's the supernormal stimulus. It's a kind of heightened, exaggerated version of reality that triggers this oversized response.
Okay, that makes sense in birds and geese. But how does this connect to us? To humans?
Well, think about junk food. It's a perfect example. Our ancestors, for, thousands of years, craved salt, sugar, fat. Why?
Because they were rare and packed with energy. Survival, basically.
Precisely. Finding those things meant survival, so we developed a strong drive for them.
But now, well, now they're everywhere. Salt, sugar, fat are definitely not scarce anymore.
Right. But our brains haven't really caught up. We still have that ancient programming. And the modern food industry, they've become masters at creating these supernormal stimuli for our taste buds.
Oh, absolutely. You can tell it's not accidental.
Right.
They engineer the crunch, the fizz. What was that term for mouthfeel?
Or sensation, yeah, optimizing the texture, and things like dynamic contrast.
Dynamic contrast.
Like the crispy outside and the soft inside of a French fry. Or an Oreo, the crunchy cookie, the creamy filling. Keeps the brain interested, makes you want more.
It's all designed to hit that sweet spot. Or rather, the bliss point, right? That perfect storm of salt, sugar, fat that just lights up our reward pathways.
Totally. They've essentially hacked our primal cravings. And, you have to wonder about the bigger picture, the public health side of constantly being surrounded by these hyper-palatable foods.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. And it's not just food, is it? The source mentions other examples.
Definitely. Think about mannequins with, well, impossible proportions. Or social media, the constant chase for likes.
That validation hit.
Exactly. Or online pornography, super edited ads. They all take naturally attractive features and dial them way, way up.
Pushing those same buttons just in different ways.
Yeah.
Driving us towards maybe excessive behaviors.
And the trend seems to be heading towards even more intense stimuli, doesn't it?
Seems like it. More concentrated rewards. The source mentions, like, junk food having more concentrated calories than traditional foods, liquor having more alcohol than beer or wine, video games being more stimulating than board games.
It's like we're facing temptations that are constantly getting stronger, more refined than anything our ancestors dealt with.
Okay, so our brains are primed to react strongly to these supercharged signals. But what's actually happening in the brain, the chemistry? That brings us to dopamine, right?
Yes, exactly. What's driving that craving? Dopamine is a huge player here. It's a neurotransmitter, deeply involved in desire, in motivation, that wanting feeling. A lot of that happens in a part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens.
Right, and there was that really stark experiment back in the 50s. Olds and Milner. They blocked dopamine in rats.
Yeah, 1954. And the results were dramatic. The rats just lost all motivation. Completely.
They wouldn't eat or drink?
Nothing. They essentially lost the will to live, to seek any reward. They just wasted away, died of thirst in days.
Wow. So dopamine is fundamental to that drive, that wanting. But wasn't there a follow-up? where they gave the dopamine-depleted rats sugar directly.
Yes, and this is key. They still seemed to enjoy the sugar. They licked their lips, showed signs of pleasure. The liking was still there.
But they wouldn't seek it out.
Exactly. Without the dopamine fueling the wanting, there was no action, no motivation to go get it, which, really shows how important that anticipation, that desire is for actually getting us to do things.
Okay, so lack of dopamine kills motivation. What about the opposite? Too much dopamine.
Well, other experiments flooded the reward systems with dopamine, and what happened? Habits formed incredibly fast.
Like the mice poking their noses hundreds of times an hour just for that dopamine hit.
Yeah, it's quite similar to the compulsive behavior you see in, say, gambling,
Yeah.
hitting the slot machine lever over and over.
So the really habit-forming stuff, drugs, junk food, video games, social media, they're all associated with these big dopamine spikes.
Very much so. But it's important to remember, even our normal everyday habits involve dopamine release. It's fundamental.
Okay, so for ages, people thought dopamine is pleasure. But it's more complicated than that.
Much more. It's involved in learning, memory, motivation, even controlling movement. But for habits, the really crucial insight, the game changer, is that dopamine isn't just released when we get the reward.
It's released before.
Yes, in anticipation of the reward. That's huge.
Like the gambling addict getting the rush before they even placed a bet, or the cocaine addict seeing the powder.
Precisely. It's the anticipation that actually drives the action. The reward system lights up both when we get a reward and when we expect one.
So that feeling of looking forward to something Christmas morning as a kid, planning a vacation sometimes, that anticipation is almost better than the thing itself.
It can feel that way, yeah. That's the dopamine surge during the wanting phase. The source talks about this difference between wanting and liking.
And it mentions a figure 9, which obviously we can't show, but it illustrates this dopamine pattern.
Right. The idea is when you first get a reward, dopamine spikes then. But once the habit forms and you recognize the cue
that predicts the reward.
the dopamine spike shifts earlier. It happens before you even do the behavior, right when you encounter the cue. It's the anticipation kicking in.
And what if the reward doesn't come? If you expect it, but oops, nothing happens.
Dopamine levels actually drop below baseline then. That's disappointment. But if the reward does come, even if it's delayed, you get another spike, which reinforces the whole loop cue action reward.
So the brain is constantly learning, predicting, adjusting based on dopamine. And you mentioned our brains have more circuitry for wanting than liking.
That's right. The areas driving desire and motivation, like the nucleus accumbens, are pretty extensive compared to the smaller spots, the hedonic hot spots, that process pure pleasure.
Which really underlines it. Desire, that anticipation, is the engine. It's what makes us act.
Desire is the engine of behavior,
Yeah.
driven by anticipation.
Okay, so this all ties back to the second law. Make it attractive. We need to leverage this dopamine loop, make the anticipation of our good habits rewarding, which leads us nicely into a practical strategy, temptation bundling.
Yeah, temptation bundling is such a neat trick. It's quite elegant, really.
So the idea is you pair something you want to do with something you need to do.
Exactly. You link them together. You're essentially creating a new pathway in your brain, associating the need with the pleasure of the want.
The example in the source is great. The student who hooked up his exercise bike to Netflix.
Perfect example. He could only watch Netflix if he was pedaling.
So the need exercise became the gateway to the want entertainment. Brilliant.
It is. And you see companies doing this too, like ABC's old TGIT campaign, Thank God It's Thursday.
Oh, right. Shonda Rhimes shows back to back.
Yeah, and they promoted watching it while, drinking wine, eating popcorn, relaxing.
So they bundled watching their shows, the behavior they wanted, with activities people already enjoyed and looked forward to.
Exactly. You start associating Thursday nights and those specific shows with relaxation, fun, indulgence. It makes the whole package more attractive.
It becomes a ritual.
Right. And this taps into something called Premack's principle. Basically, a more probable behavior, something you're likely to do anyway, like watching TV or eating popcorn, can reinforce a less probable behavior, like maybe tuning into a specific show, or in other examples, doing chores.
So you use the fun thing to pull the necessary thing along.
Pretty much. You make access to the desired activity contingent on doing the needed one first.
Okay, this sounds really useful. The source even gives a kind of formula, right?
Yeah.
Combining it with habit stacking.
Yeah, it's a simple two-step. 1, after my current habit, I will have it I need. 2, after habit I need, I will have it I want.
Can you give an example of how that works?
Sure, like 1, after I pour my morning coffee current habit, I will meditate for 1 minute habit I need. 2, after I meditate for 1 minute habit I need, I will check my favorite new site habit I want.
Okay, or maybe 1. After I get home from work, current habit, I will change into my workout clothes habit I need.
Yeah.
2. After I change into workout clothes habit I need, I will watch one episode of my favorite show habit I want.
Exactly. The need becomes the ticket to the want. And the goal is eventually you actually start looking forward to the need habit, or at least finding it less burdensome because you associate it with the enjoyable thing that comes right after.
You're essentially creating your own supernormal stimulus for the habit you want to build.
That's a great way to put it. You're artificially boosting its appeal by linking it directly to something you already crave.
Okay, let's wrap this up. Key takeaways. The second law, make it attractive. Crucial.
Definitely. And remember, habits are dopamine driven. That loop is powerful.
And it's the anticipation, not just getting the reward, that really fuels the action, that wanting.
The wanting versus the liking. And temptation bundling is a practical way to hack this. Pair what you need to do with what you want to do.
Create that rewarding anticipation for the good habits.
Exactly. Understanding the science really gives you, the listener, a set of tools to make meaningful changes.
So, final thought for you listening. What want behaviors could you link to your need behaviors? Where are those opportunities for temptation bundling in your own life?
And maybe think about those supernormal stimuli around you. How are they shaping your desires? Knowing that, could you maybe use that understanding to make your own chosen habits more appealing, more powerful?
It really comes down to harnessing that engine of desire, that anticipation, and pointing it in the direction you want to go, making it work for you.